Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chernesky, in your testimony, I'm going to read from it. It says, RISA did little in the form of reforms while simultaneously dangerously expanding the scope of surveillance by changing the definition of what was considered an electronic communications service provider. Could you expand on that a little bit? What are you talking about there that RISA actually did not solve the problem and may have made it worse?
Thank you for the question, Representative. When we were looking at RISA last year, as a part of the reforms, they included a provision in there that would expand the definition of an electronic communication service provider. Now, this used to be a more narrowly tailored thing to capture data, from these particularized companies, but the way that they expanded the definition would capture a wider array of companies to virtually including everybody, right? And so what you ended up seeing was from the Department of Defense, or Justice rather, they made a promise that they were gonna keep their searches for this kind of data a lot more limited. But again, it is still problematic enough that even the chair of the Senate Intel Committee, Senator Warner, committed to trying to get a fix to that. Unfortunately, that still has not gotten done to date. But this is a real serious threat if now virtually anybody that has data on Americans could be subjected to being considered an electronic communication service provider.
So we think the new leadership at the FBI is going to be better in terms of respecting people's constitutional rights. Should Congress just move on from this issue, or should it act?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I think that in light of the fact that administrations can change, I would not want to leave it up for interpretation for a potential abuse underneath a future administration. So I do think that Congress should act to go and fix this overly broad definition of an electronic communication service provider.
Mr. Chair, could you comment on the amendment that Mr. Biggs had in his bill allowed for limited exceptions, yet we were being browbeaten saying that, no, you cannot do this, you cannot pass the Biggs bill because there will be no way out to be able to get a perhaps bad actor. Would you care to comment on that?
Sure, well, and a number of reasons were offered for that, and my analysis is that it was all just fear-mongering. I mean, every single objection that I heard was just based on a misunderstanding of Mr. Biggs' amendment. For example, as Chairman Jordan mentioned earlier, the amendment had an exigent circumstances exception, so that if there were a ticking time bomb, the agency could act without getting a warrant. And of course, the amendment allowed for people to consent to searches. So if the FBI thought that somebody was being the subject of a cyber attack, for example, they could go to that person and say, we think you may be the subject of a cyber attack. Could we search your communications so that we can find out who it is and try to forestall it? And that person could then consent. And that's also a well-recognized exception under the Fourth Amendment. So the committee very carefully, and Chairman Biggs very carefully built in the protections that the FBI might legitimately need to be able to conduct searches without a warrant.
So the long and short of it, the Biggs Amendment dealt with what you term the exigent circumstances.
Yes,
is that correct?
It had an express exception for that, and it also exempted metadata searches. So the FBI could actually look to see who was communicating with whom under Chairman Biggs' amendment. It just couldn't actually search the communications themselves.
I want to ask you another question, and I'm not sure if you're going to, you let me know if you can answer it or not. In 2021, the FBI lawyer, Kevin Kleinmith,
yes,
was sentenced to 12 months probation versus a typical 5 years. Why was that?
Well, it was an unfortunate slap on the wrist, and I'm separately representing Carter Page in his litigation against the department, and I thought it was an outrage that Kleinmith got such a low sentence for such an egregious act of dishonesty before the FISA court.
Who was the judge in that FISA court case?
I believe it was Judge Boasberg.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, this is the same Judge Boasberg that we see regularly in the news these days. The ultimate insider judge here in Washington, D.C. gives a slap on the wrist to Kevin Kleinmith, who misrepresented the information out there to the detriment of, it sounds like, your client. and now is doing everything he can to keep foreign alien criminals in the United States rather than sending them back home. I yield.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes the ranking member of the entire committee, Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of people were willing to give 702 a chance because of the various exceptions